Good evening. This is Atheist History Week, and I'm John Rafferty, President of the Secular Humanist Society of New York, and a proud and active member of New York City Atheists, which produces this show. Every week at this time, we gather here together, you and me, to look at the week's anniversaries in the history of free thought, of atheism, agnosticism, secularism, humanism, skepticism, rationalism, what have you-ism, as long as it isn't religionism. We discuss notable people, the famous and the not so famous, and some of the infamous, who were born or died or achieved something significant during this week in the course of history, this calendar week in the course of history. And we look at significant events that took place this week in history: court cases, publishing events, religious riots, burnings at the stake, and other faith-based fun and games. Let's start this week with a song, which I promise I will not sing, but I will recite, called The Preacher and the Slave. Long-haired preachers come out every night, try to tell you what's wrong and what's right, but when asked about something to eat, they will answer in voices so sweet. You will eat by and by in that glorious land in the sky. Work and pray, live on hay, you'll get pie in the sky when you die. That's a lie. Oh, the Starvation Army, they play, and they sing, and they clap, and they pray, till they get all your coin on the drum, then they'll tell you when you're on the bum. If you fight hard for children and wife, try to get something good in your life, you're a sinner and bad man, they tell. When you die, you will sure go to hell. Holy rollers and jumpers come out, and they holler, they jump and they shout. Give your money to Jesus, they say. He will cure all diseases today. Working folk of all countries unite. Side by side we for freedom will fight. Then the world and its wealth we will have gained. To the grafters we'll sing this refrain. You will eat by and by, when you've learned how to cook and to fry. Chop some wood, 'twill do you good, and you'll eat in this sweet by and by. That's no lie. Joe Hill. Born October 7th in 1879. And perhaps my favorite noble hero of the American dream. Joe Hill was a union organizer, an itinerant laborer, a poet, and as we have just seen, a songwriter. He was born Joel Hagelund in Gavle, Sweden, and his parents, devout Lutherans. He got his songwriting and poetry ability from them because they filled their house. They loved music, and they filled their house with songs. And he learned the piano at a very young age and started working in local cafes. Any rate, he left school and went to work because he had to. And his father died when he was only 9 years old, and everybody had to pull together in hardscrabble Sweden and support each other. He at the age of 20, he was diagnosed with skin and joint tuberculosis and was taken to Stockholm for an operation that brought scars that disfigured him, and he looked like hell for the rest of his life. But he lived. And his mother died 2 years later when he was 22 years old, and he and his brother Paul packed up to come to America and work and send back money to their other siblings in Sweden. He worked various labor jobs for years, moving gradually from the East Coast to the West. He saw in the mines and the fields the terrible injustice of the early 20th century and became a union organizer. And while he did it, he also wrote songs, which made him one of the more popular union organizers. There were songs about immigrant factory workers, homeless migratory workers, and railway shopcraft workers. He became very involved with the International Workers of the World, the IWW, or these. In their Little Red Songbook, Hill songs include The Tramp, There's Power in the Union, Rebel Girl, and Casey Jones, Union Scab. And, of course, The Preacher and the Slave, which I just read to you a little while ago. That particularly, by the way, is sung to the same tune as In the Sweet By and By, the hymn. And, of course, it mocks the Salvation Army, which, as you heard, he called the Starvation Army. He was at the center of strikes, fights for emancipation of the working class, and protests alongside socialists, suffragists, and AFL members. So he was suspected of anything that happened, and in 1914, a grocer in Utah and his son were killed in what appeared to be a revenge killing, and the police picked up Joe Hill, who was an unpopular newcomer to the Utah scene, involved in a fight and had a gunshot wound, and they said, haha, there it is. This is the guy who killed the grocer. Hill maintained, and his supporters believed, that he had a perfect alibi. He was with a woman he shouldn't have been with, but he refused to name her. So he got himself convicted. But the the outcry went from local to national to international, and he had been sentenced to death, and many famous people of the time, like Helen Keller, tried to intercede, tried to to get his execution stayed. The President of the United States, Woodrow Wilson, twice intervened to try to stop the execution, but Utah law, the Utah governor didn't have to pay any attention to the President of the United States, and he was indeed hanged. Just before his death, he wrote to the former president of the Western Federation of Miners, Big Bill Hayward. Goodbye, Bill. I die like a true rebel. Don't waste any time mourning. Organize. And then he wrote, it's 100 miles from here to Wyoming. Could you arrange to have my body hauled to the state line to be buried? I don't want to be found dead in Utah. And as a matter of fact, his body was cremated, and his ashes were distributed to every IWW local except the one in Utah. That funeral, 30,000 people attended it. And according to the Deseret Evening News, no creed or religion found a place at the service. There were no prayers and no hymns, but there was a mighty chorus of voices singing songs written by Hill. He wrote one last poem on the eve of his execution. He wrote, my body, if I could choose, I would to ashes it reduce, and let the merry breezes blow, my dust to wear would come to life and bloom again. This is my last and final will. Good luck to you. In a lovely ballad called Joe Hill, written by Alfred Hayes and set to music by Earl Robinson, the words come, and I love this, from San Diego up to Maine, in every mine and mill, where workers strike and organize, says he, you'll find Joe Hill. Joe Hill, born October 7th, 1879 in Sweden, and who became one of the most celebrated and hated members of the American workers' movement of the early 20th century. A martyr. The man was innocent, and he was hanged while innocent. In 1925, on October 3rd, Gore Vidal was born. And he was born at West Point in New York, where his father had been, or at the time was, an instructor. He largely grew up in the home of his grandfather, Senator Thomas Gore, Democrat of Oklahoma. And that military background of his father's, he graduated from Phillips Exeter Academy and joined the enlisted reserve Corps, and he wrote his first novel, Willow, that was published when he was only 19 years old. Published, but not a big deal. And as a matter of fact, I never even heard of it until I started doing this research. And but along came the much bigger deal, The City and the Pillar. And for the first time in American literature, there was a mainstream novel and a best-selling novel, The City and the Pillar, which had as its protagonist a gay man who was not a killer or a psychopath or a child molester or anything else. He was a nice person who was gay, as is Gore Vidal, who is still very much with us. He wrote many other novels and plays, and they mostly revolve around history and politics. Julian, which was a book I loved, which is a sympathetic look at the Byzantine Emperor Julian the Apostate, who tried to bring back the pagan religions after in the 4th century AD. After Christianity had been established in Byzantium. He wrote Burr in 1974, which was mainly about Aaron Burr, and I shouldn't say mainly, it's about Burr. Again, also a sympathetic look at a not very sympathetic character in American history. He's also wrote Myra Breckinridge, which was a success de scandale, as the French would say, a nearly pornographic book in 1968 that was made into a movie, which also was a big deal. Look back at it now, I don't think I'd spend 10 minutes rereading it. And Live from Golgotha, an irreverent satire, imagining the New Testament events as if they were being reported on TV. Not great literature, but a lot of fun. And he is, Gore Vidal, who lives in Italy now, who has said pretty much he's basically given up on the United States, although he comes back and keeps his hand in, so to speak. And has gotten into a fight with Norman Mailer recently, probably. They did have a few fistfights, almost live on television a couple of times. He left the country. Vidal, on a number of occasions, tried to, he took some political runs. He is the cousin of Al Gore, by the way. He tried for a U.S. Senate seat in California. There were 9 in the field. He came in second, but that doesn't earn you any cigars. He, obviously, a gay man, a Democrat, a liberal, of course, right? And probably the best one-line description of Ronald Reagan ever. He called Reagan a triumph of the embalmer's art. Probably, wrote Gordon Wood in the Times, probably no American writer since Benjamin Franklin has derided, ridiculed, and mocked Americans more skillfully and more often than Gore Vidal. Freethinker, atheist, yeah. Oh yeah. That's not what his public persona is, but he's on record, no question. I regard monotheism, he said, monotheism, he said, as the greatest disaster ever to befall the human race. I see no good in Judaism, Christianity, or Islam. And that Christianity was a silly religion. Gore Vidal, born October 3rd in 1925. Still with us, still writing, and still telling us what a bunch of idiots we are. On October 1st in 1847 was born Annie Besant. Who was born Annie Wood, and married at an early age. She was born in London, and at an early age, she married the unpleasant Reverend Frank Besant, and later quipped in an early autobiography she wrote that the Reverend Besant had very high ideas of a husband's authority and a wife's submission. But young Annie met some liberal ministers, and after a course of reading, gave up Christianity at the age of 25, and as you can imagine, that didn't set so well with the Reverend Besant, and they split at her age of 25. And she met Charles Bradlaugh, a gentleman who was born on September 26, in 1833. But last week, we didn't have enough time to get to him. And Bradlaugh himself was an important writer, journalist, and freethinker who wrote once that, I maintain that thoughtful atheism affords greater possibility for human happiness than any system yet based on, or possible to be founded on, theism, and that the lives of true atheists must be more virtuous, because more human, than those of the believers in the deity. Atheism, he said, properly understood, is no mere disbelief, is in no wise a cold, barren negative. It is, on the contrary, a hearty, fruitful affirmation of all truth, and involves the positive assertion of action of the highest humanity. Annie Besant met Bradlaugh, who was a prominent free thought leader and an attorney for the poor, and he offered her a position on this weekly National Reformer. They were a platonic couple who worked together, and they worked together writing, speaking, and touring Great Britain, and she became a celebrity among performers. George Bernard Shaw called her the greatest orator in England and possibly in Europe. Annie moved Charles Bradlaugh a little bit into the area of women's rights, convincing him to use his publishing house to reprint The Fruits of Philosophy, a book about birth control. And there was an Obscene Publications Act which made it unlawful to even write about birth control. And so when the book came out, they were, Annie and Charles were both arrested. They were tried and just narrowly avoided jail. she then shrewdly rewrote the book, and it became a bestseller, and hastened the birth control movement worldwide. But her involvement in that, in late 19th century England, her involvement in the cause of birth control caused her to lose her custody of her 8-year-old child that the Reverend Besant claimed he should have because she was not a fit mother, because she believed and wrote about birth control. She became a student at London University when it began to admit women in 1878, and she was the only one who received honors in 1881 in botany in the class run by no one less than Thomas Huxley. She was active in free thought circles, speaking, writing, touring for the rest of her life. Unfortunately, she later on became influenced by the Theosophy movement. And although she tried to remain loyal to free thought, she became the success mystic Madame Blavatsky, who founded Theosophy, and she moved to India, and she but even in India, Besant was a true reformer, never quite losing her practical bent. So she started campaigning for Indian home rule, which was a radical idea that the Indians should, the people of India should be given a measure of self-control within the British Empire. Freedom, independence, no. But she was later praised by Nehru himself that she was the mother of India. And she it was all mixed up in Theosophy, but still free thought and all, and died in 1933. She said, "I rejoice that I played my part in that educating of England which has made impossible forevermore the crude superstitions of the past and the repetition of the cruelties and injustices under which preceding heretics suffered." Heretic? Yeah, Annie Besant, born October 1st, 1847. On October 5th, way back in 1713, the encyclopedist Denis Diderot was born in France, and his lower-class family had him scheduled to become a priest. And in fact, at 13, he was tonsured, tonsured, the hair cut off over here, shaved off, and entitled Abbé, as in abbot. He then went to Paris to continue his studies, but young Denis studied a little too hard, and he found out that what he was studying he no longer believed in. And he abandoned his faith when he became exposed to science and free thought ideas. He left Catholicism and moved gradually to deism, which was all the rage in mid-18th century Paris, and then from deism to atheism. In fact, in 1745, he wrote, "From fanaticism to barbarism is only one step." And he wrote Pensées philosophiques, philosophical thoughts, in 1746. The church demanded and got it approved that the book was burned in public, and because it had such heresy in it as his statement that skepticism is the first step toward truth. He wrote an essay called An Essay on Blindness, and the blindness he was talking about was the blindness of the mind, not of the eye. And he spent 3 months in jail for that one. That 3 months in jail in mid-18th century France convinced Diderot that maybe the best idea would be to circulate his ideas and his writing in private, which is what he did from there on out, until he was commissioned the editor of the first major encyclopedia. And Diderot saw this as a great opportunity, and instead of just doing, decided to make it the tome, the statement of the revolution that was to come. So he brought in all kinds of rationalist contributors, including Voltaire, and his encyclopedia became the monument to the age of enlightenment.